Welcome to the Ease into Retirement podcast. I'm Tom Mosley. Welcome to number 23. Number 23 of the Ease into Retirement podcast. I promise if you'll give me 15 minutes, I'll do my best to build your financial knowledge. Now, we're really excited about today. We're going to continue what we started last week. Last week, we started talking about the elements of a real retirement plan, and we talked about the foundation needed to be income. And if you missed last week, it's number 22 on our site, or you can find it on Apple or Spotify or a bunch of other things that I don't know many after those two. But you can go back and you'll see how we talked you through Social Security, and we touched on pensions, and we touched on rentals. And those are the things that once you leave a job, you then have for income in most cases. You could have others. I'm not exactly sure. You could have a part-time job. You could have royalties coming in from things that you have invented. But mostly it boils down to Social Security, pensions, rentals, and annuities. And by the way, like we talked about last time, Social Security and pensions are annuities. Now, today, we want to talk about in episode 23, the second half of the foundation of income. And we want to talk about how do you determine how much you need, and then how do you get that into your account each week or each month. Now, here we go. When you retire, it's very important that you put yourself through a grueling, horrible, arduous task. And that is, you sit down and you really work up, and I'm sorry, ladies and men, I'm going to say a four-letter word, budget, B-U-D-G-E-T. For most people, that's a four-letter word. But if you've got, now think about it, you don't have any income coming in from your job anymore in most cases. You do have social, you do have maybe some of these other things, but you need to know how much you need in your budget to have a need budget of we absolutely need that much, and a want to budget of we'd like to want that much in our budget to see if we can go do the things and enjoy the things that we've always wanted to do and enjoy in retirement. So no matter how you look at it, if you are going to build and you're going to put together the elements of a real retirement plan, that foundation of income has to be based, and you have to know how much income you need. And the only way to do that is to have a budget put together. Now, in case you say, well, man, I've never had a budget, I don't know how to do this. It's really not that hard. You say, it's like eating an elephant. It's so big to put together a budget. Absolutely. But you probably heard the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. Now, we have, and we can make it available to you if you want to email me at tom@easeintoretirement.com or call us 714-421-4288. All you got to say is this: I listened to podcast number 23 on putting together a budget, and I need the budget worksheet. Now, that budget worksheet is going to work you through. All you got to do is just take it a bite at a time, like eating the elephant. All you got to do is you put down what your mortgage or rent is. You put down what your insurance is. You put down what your property taxes are. What have you spent in the last year or so in repairs? What are your HOA, your housing association, your anything that you're doing there? If you're paying extra money on your mortgage to get it paid off in a certain time, that's one little category. Take a breath. Go walk around the block and then come back and work on the next one. What do you spend on utilities? Take a breath. What do you spend on food, health, medical, transportation? And then there's about 7 or 8 things that it lists there from miscellaneous, and then entertainment and recreation. Sometimes that's a huge chunk of your budget. But if you're going to shoot for a proper amount of income that you need, how are you going to determine what you need unless you have a budget and say, that's what I need? And then if you want to do a second budget, say, that's what I'd like to have in retirement. Now, once you have that working number, you can go to work on what you do have already coming in and determine if there's a gap. You say, what do you mean? Well, let's say, just for the sake of putting some numbers to it, you have a need of $5,500 a month coming in. Okay, you need $5,500 a month by the time you consider housing, food, transportation, entertainment, all of those things. You work through a budget. You say, Tom, we need $5,500 a month before taxes are taken out. Okay, then we've got something to work with. So then I go to you and I say, well, how much do you two have coming in from Social Security? Well, I have $2,500 and my husband has $1,500. So you got $4,000 coming in from Social Security, and you've got a need of $5,500 coming in. So you've got a gap then. If you subtract $4,000 from the $5,500, you see how we then realize what the gap is? You've got a gap in your income of $1,500. Well, where's that going to come from? Well, it could come from various sources. You could say, well, when I retire, I've got two guys right now. One works at Home Depot, one works at Lowe's. Automatically, they're opponents of each other in the commercial world, but the guy who works at Home Depot loves it, and the guy who works at Lowe's loves it. But they went out and they got a job so they could delay, one, taking their Social Security, and two, taking any money out of any retirement plans that they might have built up, like their 401ks that have now become IRAs and those kind of things. And so they just got a job. They're working 20 hours a week, and maybe the spouse is still working in one of the cases and not working in the other, but they've tried to close that gap by earning $1,500 a month. And then others want to go out and they say, no, Tom, we've got to draw from our investments.
Hey folks, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ease into Retirement podcast with Tom Mosley. Just a quick reminder that if anything you've heard so far today has hit home for you, maybe it's something you're dealing with, maybe it's just something you want to learn a little bit more about, there will be a complimentary downloadable giveaway on Tom's website, specifically prepared for this week's episode, that you should check out. Just go to easepodcast.com. That's EASE podcast.com. Click the button with the title of this week's episode and get your copy today. Now I'll throw it back to Tom.
Okay, so how do you fill that gap if you're drawing from that investment? Well, first of all, you need to segment what you've saved in investments, and you need to segment them, I believe, three ways. You need to have one segment, one bucket that you say, I want to have that much of my investment money in my income bucket. Now, most people like to have in that bucket 3 to 5 years of income. So let's break this down. You need $1,500 more a month in the scenario we're working on, and that's $18,000 a year. So if you have 3 years, you need about $55,000 in that bucket. And if you want to go 5 years, you have $90,000. If I were helping you and working with you, I'd say let's keep 60 if you wanted 3 years, a little margin, or let's keep 100 if you wanted 5 years of margin. But that's your income bucket, all right? Now next, you need another little bucket. It doesn't need to be very big. It needs to be anywhere from, depends on you, it needs to be anywhere from $10,000 to maybe $50,000. I even have one couple that run a small business in retirement, and they keep $100,000 in there, but that's their emergency fund. That's if things don't go well. That's if they have a downturn in the business for 2 or 3 months and they have to draw on something. So they keep a little money in an emergency fund. And then the third bucket can be your stock market bucket or your growth bucket. And you want to invest that third bucket. Let's work backwards. You want to invest that third bucket in the market equal to your risk level. Now, if you've got a 50 risk level, you know that would go into what we call balanced funds in the portfolios that I run and manage for our clients. If you wanted a moderate, if you were 65 risk factor, you'd want them in the moderate bucket. But we could determine what that was invested in the market by your risk score, by your riskalyze, by your what's called your internal risk tolerance. So working at this scenario, remember, we determined a budget of $5,500. You got to work through that. We determined Social Security income of $4,000. Okay, we subtracted that from the $5,500 and we said, okay, we need $1,500 more a month. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you've got $600,000 in IRAs and 401ks. in that scenario, what we would most likely do if you wanted to keep all of the money invested in the market, I'll give you another alternative in just a moment. In the conservative bucket, you would put $100,000. You'd put it in something very conservative, but if so, you've got if you did that, you'd have 5 years of that $1,500 a month that you need for income. That's your income bucket. You'd put maybe $25,000 in your emergency fund bucket, and that would leave you with $600,000, about $450,000 to leave in the market. Now you say, well, wait a minute. How would I replenish the income bucket? Well, here's how you would do it. The market doesn't always go up every year. A lot of years it does. Usually about 7 or 8 years out of 10, it's going to go up. So let's say that $450,000 grew one year and it grew $50,000. It was a good year in the market. You grew 10%, way out there in that money that, remember, you don't need it for 5 years, so you don't have to worry about the market having its blips up and blips down. So you don't need that money, and you grew $50,000 this year. It's a great time to harvest about 40 or 50 of that, or maybe 25 of that, and replenish every year that you can that income bucket. And so that income bucket stays at $100,000 is the ideal goal. Your emergency fund, you might need to replenish that if you had to put on a roof or buy a new car. But that growth bucket fuels the growth you need by being in the market. Now, you say, well, what happens if there's a year where there's a downturn and it goes down to $400,000? No problem. Just sit still for a year. And usually, very unusually, unless really horrific times come, does the market stay down. In fact, year after year after year, since they had a Dow Jones Industrial Average in 1896, the market's gone up some years, down some years, up some years, down some years, but overall, the market has a positive trajectory. So over a period of time, you feed off the gains of that 5-year out bucket that's in the growth bucket number 3. You replenish the income bucket so that you always have a 5-year margin. You say you could go for 5 years without having to worry about the market. Yeah, most of the time the market is probably not going to stay down for 5 years, maybe even not to stay down for 3 years. So you would have enough growth there to continue to replenish the income market and the income bucket, and you could replenish any emergency fund. So that's if you wanted to leave all of the money invested in the market. Now, the other way to approach this is, well, Tom, what if I don't want to leave that income bucket in the market? I want to leave some money in the market, but I don't want to take a chance on that income bucket. Well, that's where you can come and you can insure that bucket. You can put enough money, and that can be calculated by whatever you need in your gap. You can put enough money in that bucket to purchase. And I consider purchasing an annuity buying your income. You could buy enough income to fill that gap. And if you buy the right kind of fixed indexed annuity, you can buy one that's got guaranteed, it'll never go backwards in your income. You could buy one that's got increasing income as in the years that the market goes up. And you could buy one that's guaranteed to last as long as you last, or as long as you and your spouse last. So you can put enough money, it takes more than $100,000 in most cases, but you could put enough money in there potentially that you could buy a fixed indexed annuity, and it's insured by an A+ rated insurance carrier. So then you worry about the emergency bucket, making sure it stays funded, and then you let your play money or your play check or your fund money stay over there in the market. When it grows, you take your tours. When it goes down, you maybe back off your spending a little bit, but you know that those necessary income items are always going to be taken care of by the insured annuity. You're going to make about 3, 4, or 5% in there, and it's not going to make as much money as you're going to make in the market. You could potentially make more money in the market. Okay, I just said you're not going to make as much money. That's potentially. You could potentially make more money in the market, but you're going to have your guarantees with that fixed indexed annuity. The biggest thing you need to look at is, number 1, we need a budget. Number 2, we need to figure out a gap. And number 3, you need to figure out which one of those 3 bucket strategies, all in the market, conservative, emergency fund, growth fund, or insured bucket, emergency fund, growth bucket. So you need to figure out which one of those 2-3 bucket strategies fits your personality and your risk tolerance best. That's where we come in as a financial advisor, or that's where your financial advisor should come in, giving you those options so you can decide, not they can decide, but so you can decide what option is best for you. Hey, I hope you've gotten something out of these income talks that we had last week in number 22 and this week in number 23. Next week, we're going to talk about inflation and how that can impact your income through retirement and your investments through retirement. So until next time, if you like it, tell somebody about it. Tell somebody to jump on here. Subscribe to it if you like it so you can get notified all the time. But if you like it, tell somebody. If you want another subject or something down the road and you'd like us to build a podcast on that, let me know. I'm Tom Mosley. You can reach me at 714-421-4288, or you can email me at tom@easeintoretirement.com. Until next time, I promise you every time, if you'll give me 15 minutes, I will do my best to build your financial knowledge.
Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services. Ed Slott's IRA Advisor Group is a paid membership educational organization comprised of professionals of varying credentials. Membership in this organization does not imply a set level of skill or training. The logo and/or service mark is the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement of Tom Mosley is stated or implied.
A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.